Okay, so we just learned about Odysseus's origin story. We learned about the situation of his birth. We learned about his early obstacle, being scarred by a boar. And we learned about how he revealed his powers, that he could string the bow and that he has some super strength ability. Now, the last section ended with now Odysseus, he needs to get married. So Odysseus goes to Sparta. You may have heard of Sparta. It was one of those Greek city-states. And that's where Helen lives. So Helen is no ordinary mortal. Her father is Zeus. So she's a demigod. Her father was Zeus, king of all kings, god of all gods. Her mother was the queen of Sparta. And as this graphic novel notes, she fell in love with Zeus when he was a swan. Now, if we use our critical thinking skills for a second, that might not be what we consider love. But essentially, Zeus liked Leda, came to her as a swan, and she became pregnant with Helen. The story goes that Helen was hatched from a giant egg. So Helen, being the daughter of Zeus, is the most beautiful woman in the world. The king of Sparta, who knows that Zeus is the father, but still, has to take care of her because it's Zeus, right? You can't make Zeus mad. He decides to start looking for a husband once she's old enough. So he invites all the Greek princes. Odysseus, being a prince of Ithaca, comes. However, Odysseus is not chosen by the king of Sparta. Menelaus is. Now, Menelaus is another Greek prince, and his brother, Agamemnon, ends up becoming sort of the king of all of Greece. So Menelaus is a very powerful man. So Odysseus and all the other princes swear to be loyal to Menelaus, and then Odysseus goes and finds himself a wife, a kind wife, and he meets Penelope. And so he ends up marrying a woman named Penelope. They go home to Ithaca, and they actually truly love each other. So he's not upset he didn't get chosen for Helen. All right, so let's answer some questions real fast. Who are Helen's parents and what is weird about her birth? Well, her father is Zeus, and he came to her mother as a swan. Menelaus is the prince who gets to marry Helen. Odysseus marries Penelope, and she is known as being lovely, wise, gracious, and loving. She might not be the most beautiful woman in the world, but she's wonderful anyway. I didn't like the way that sounded. You don't have to be the most beautiful woman in the world to be worthy. That's what I should have said. Anyway, we shouldn't judge women by their appearances so much. Okay, so now that Odysseus is married and Helen is married, she'll come back in the story. She's important. So Menelaus becomes king of Sparta. He and Helen are happy together, but not for long because the goddesses start to mess with their lives. So Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who many of us may have heard before, she decides to get involved in their lives because she promises Helen, who's married to Menelaus, she promises Helen to Paris. Now, the reason she does that is that Paris, who is the prince of Troy, is very handsome, and Aphrodite likes him. And so Aphrodite asks him to judge a beauty contest. So she says to Paris, who's the most beautiful, me or Hera or Athena? But then she's like, I really don't want to lose this. So she bribes him to make sure she wins. So Paris says that Aphrodite is the most beautiful goddess. And what he gets in return is that Aphrodite said that she would make Helen fall in love with him. The other goddesses are really angry because they lost this beauty pageant. And so now they're mad and they want to get back at Aphrodite and at Paris. So Paris travels to Sparta. King Menelaus welcomes him like, oh, this is a prince from Troy. Troy and Greece were not the same country, so it's like a foreign prince, but they, have a cordial experience. And then Aphrodite uses her goddess magic to send Menelaus away. When Menelaus leaves and Paris and Helen are alone together, they fall madly in love. And then because they could not stay and, carry on their affair in Menelaus' kingdom, they run away to Troy. So that's how the Trojan War begins. Menelaus is furious. He calls on Agamemnon, and they get all of the Greek princes together to go to war against Troy. So we're going to take a brief minute to discuss the roles of the goddesses. Hera, one of the goddesses in the beauty contest, the wife of Zeus. She's the goddess of women, marriage, family, and childbirth. Athena is the goddess of wisdom and war. Aphrodite is the goddess of romantic love and beauty. Which goddess caused the problems? And if I'm going too fast, you can always pause this video. Aphrodite caused the problems by, number one, arranging this beauty contest, and number two, bribing Paris to make sure she won. And number three, promising him as a reward a woman who was already married to someone else. So that was all sorts of problems. And then Paris and Helen run off to Troy, which is where Paris is the prince. And then Menelaus responds by saying, okay, cool, we're going to go to war. So Menelaus gets all of the Greek princes together, one of which is Odysseus, and they have to go to war. Now, Odysseus, being a young man who just got married to a woman he really loves, do you think he wants to go away to fight a war over a woman who, she doesn't love you, she left with this other guy? So, my Google Home just started talking to me and scared me. So Odysseus does not want to leave. So this next section, the title, The Madness of Odysseus. So the first question I have is, what does madness mean? Let's define madness. All right, so when it comes up, our definition says the state of being mentally ill, especially severely, insanity, insaneness. So the title means Odysseus is going to pretend to be insane because he wants to get out of this war, okay? So he is going to pretend to be insane when the messenger comes to tell him he has to go to war. All right, let's look at this section. Meanwhile, while all that drama is happening with Helen and Paris and Menelaus, Odysseus and Penelope are living very happily together on the island of Ithaca. They build their house around an ancient olive tree. It shelters and protects them. Its trunk supports their marriage bed. So you have to imagine a house, and growing out of the middle of the house is this tree, and then they manage to incorporate that tree into their bed. Right? So if your bed is connected to a tree growing out of the middle of your house, your bed can probably not move. And it's going to be it's a strange but important detail that we'll want to remember later for when we start reading the Odyssey. So their bed is built around an ancient tree. What order does Menelaus send to Odysseus? Well, he sends a messenger saying Odysseus has to go to war. The years pass peacefully by. Telemachus, our son, light of my life, until one fateful day when a stranger arrives with a terrible message. An order from King Menelaus. It's war against Troy. Odysseus must keep his promise to support Menelaus. Penelope, my own land, my people. The thought of leaving home breaks his heart. When will he return? So Odysseus, when he's trying to figure out what to do, he goes to the palace seer, the palace wise man, and says, when will I return? How long will I be away? The palace seer says, after 19 years, and all your shipmates will be lost. So Odysseus is like, I don't want to go to war anyway, and I don't want to be gone for 19 years, and all of my men are going to be lost. So he pretends to be insane or mad to escape his duty. Now, this is one of those details that doesn't really translate to modern life, but apparently he's plowing in his field, and he uses an ox and a donkey, and only a crazy person would do that because oxen and donkey don't work well together. Okay, so he's pretending to be crazy in that way, but the messenger is like, oh, this man's faking. So he takes Telemachus, the baby, and throws him onto the field and is like, well, if he's really crazy, he'll just plow right over his child. But Odysseus does not plow right over his child because he's not actually crazy, and he saves his son. So he proves he's not crazy, and now he has to go fight in the war. So he sails away. And they go to find Paris, which they're not talking about the city, they're talking about the Prince Paris. They go to Troy, and they try to arrange a peaceful agreement. But because this whole thing was started with a fight between the goddesses, the men cannot work it out because the goddesses are all mingling and making people stay angry. Hera and Athena are still angry with Paris and want Menelaus to punish him. And remember that Athena is always fond of Odysseus, so she's always going to be on his side. So then the Greeks arrive to Troy with all of their ships, and it is war. Who could blame the Trojans and the Greeks for fighting over such a woman? Okay. So Aphrodite weaves magical spells to make Paris stay in love with Helen so that he won't leave, and the war continues. So we're going to take a break here, and I will start the next video in a moment.